I always believed love meant protection. That when you shared a bed with someone, you also shared safety, honesty, and the comfort of never being alone. I believed that for 15 years, until the night I found the empty pill bottle tucked behind the radiator. Until I learned the man I trusted with my life was quietly planning for it to end. My name is Claire Matthews, and this is the story of how I survived the man I thought would die for me, only to realize he might have preferred if I did. It started small, as these things often do, with a chill in my bones that wouldn't go away, a fatigue that clung to me like a wet sheet. At first, I thought it was just stress. I had just returned to work after maternity leave. Our daughter, Lily, was only 8 months old. I chalked it up to the late nights, the early mornings, the endless cycle of bottles and burp cloths. But my body disagreed. One night, I fainted in the kitchen, just collapsed. Lily was screaming in the background, and I came to with Matt, my husband, slapping my cheek and shouting my name. I remember the fear in his eyes. It felt real. But now I wonder if that fear was for me or for the timing. He insisted we go to the doctor. He was so persistent, in fact, that it startled me. Matt hated hospitals. He once skipped an MRI for a torn ligament because he didn't like the smell of antiseptic. But this time, he practically dragged me into the clinic. The tests began, blood work, scans. I watched doctors whisper in corners and nurses glance at me with something too close to pity. A week later, I was diagnosed with early-stage liver failure. The doctors were baffled. No alcohol dependency, no autoimmune indicators, no infections. It's idiopathic, they said, meaning they didn't know. But someone did. Matt changed after the diagnosis. He became attentive, too attentive. Hovering, watching. Every meal he made, every tea he poured, every supplement he insisted I take, even though the doctor hadn't prescribed any. Milk thistle helps the liver, he said one night, handing me a glass with a cloudy, bitter-tasting powder stirred in. I trusted him. Of course I did. He was my husband, the father of my child, my partner through grief, through joy, through miscarriages, through Lily's birth. What reason could I possibly have to suspect anything? Until that night. Lily had a fever. I got up to get her some children's Tylenol. The hallway was dark, but as I passed the radiator in the living room, I noticed something glinting under the baseboard. At first, I thought it was just a coin, but when I bent down, it was a pill bottle. Empty. I picked it up. The label was scratched off, but inside the cap was a prescription code. One quick Google search later, my breath caught in my throat. Amiodarone, a heart medication, in large doses, toxic to the liver. I hadn't been prescribed it, not even close. My hands trembled as I sat on the couch in the dark. The pieces began shifting, falling into place. The shakes, the dizziness, the collapse, the tea, the pills, and then the memory. Just a week earlier, Matt had left a folder open on his laptop. Something about beneficiaries. I'd only glanced before he slammed it shut. Now, I couldn't unsee it. Was he slowly poisoning me? I didn't want to believe it, but disbelief couldn't compete with the growing sickness in my gut. And when I went digging the next morning, I found the policy. Life insurance, a new one. Opened just 6 months ago, the same month I started getting sick. $500,000. Payout within 60 days of death. And guess who the sole beneficiary was? Matt walked in as I stood frozen in the home office, holding the file. He looked at the papers, then at me. and smiled. Not the warm, apologetic smile I had seen 1,000 times, but something else. Tight, cold, like a snake stretching in the sun. "Claire," he said, voice low, "you shouldn't be snooping around." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands shook so badly the papers slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the floor like broken wings. Matt moved toward me, slow, deliberate, his expression unreadable, like a stranger I'd just invited into my home. "Don't make this into something it's not," he said, his voice too calm, too steady. "Then tell me what it is," I whispered. Matt crouched down, picked up the policy and neatly tucked it back into the folder. "It's insurance, Claire, for the baby, for us. You're sick, you said it yourself." "But I'm not dying," I said, breathless. "And I didn't approve this. You forged my signature." His jaw tightened. "You were too tired. I handled it." I stepped back, bumping into the desk. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to grab Lily and leave, but another voice, the practical one, asked, "Where would I go? Who would believe me?" He was careful, calculated. There was no concrete proof, just a hunch and a bottle. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to him in bed, frozen, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing. When he reached out to touch me, I flinched. "Still upset?" he murmured. I didn't respond. He rolled over, his back to me. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal, it was danger. Real, tangible, terrifying danger. The next morning, I packed Lily's diaper bag like I always did. Matt kissed us both before leaving for work, like he always did. But the moment the door shut behind him, I went into survival mode. I called Rachel, my best friend since college, someone I hadn't leaned on in years. When she answered, I broke down. Within hours, she was at my doorstep. And by that evening, Lily and I were sleeping in her guest room. The first night I felt safe in weeks. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything, the sudden illness, the mystery pills, the insurance policy, the forgery. The officer nodded slowly, taking notes. But his eyes said it all. No concrete evidence, no direct link. They needed more, something irrefutable. So I made a choice. I went back. Rachel wasn't happy, but I told her I needed proof. I needed to catch him to him before he caught on. Matt welcomed me with open arms. "I knew you'd calm down," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. He even made dinner that night. Spaghetti, garlic bread, red wine. He poured my glass carefully. And just before I took a sip, I faked a cough, said I wasn't feeling well, flushed the wine when he wasn't looking. Then after he went to bed, I dumped the rest of the food into the trash, scraped the plates, cleaned the sink, and took the wine glass straight to a private lab the next morning. 2 days later, the results were in. Traces of amiodarone in the wine. I stared at the paper, my knees buckling. I hadn't been paranoid. I hadn't been crazy. He was poisoning me. I brought the report to the detective. This time their tone changed. This time they listened. They placed a hidden recorder in our house just in case. And what we caught shattered everything. Matt on the phone, laughing, talking to someone about how close she's getting, how she never finishes the wine anymore, how the payout would set us up for good. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. They knew, and so did I. That night, the police showed up. They took him away in cuffs. He looked at me as they read him his rights. "You're making a mistake," he said, almost convincing. Almost. But I saw it then. The flicker of panic. The realization that his plan had unraveled. I stood on the porch, holding Lily in my arms, watching the sirens fade down the road. She reached up and touched my cheek, giggling. That sound was the only thing that held me together. Because inside I was breaking, grieving, not for Matt, but for the years I lost loving someone who looked me in the eye and plotted my death. The days after Matt's arrest passed in a daze. There were endless questions, police reports, statements. Detectives combed through our home, taking photos, bagging evidence, lifting fingerprints off pill bottles and wine glasses. I just sat on the couch holding Lily, answering questions like a machine. Every time I told them what happened, it felt less like a memory and more like a cruel story someone else had lived. Except I could still feel the sting in my throat, the nausea, the fear, the betrayal. My parents arrived the next morning. They drove all night. My mother held Lily and sobbed. My father stood stiff in the hallway, his face pale with disbelief. He kept saying, "He tried to kill you. He really tried to kill you." And I just nodded. The news broke locally. Father arrested for attempted poisoning. Wife survives suspected murder plot. Our neighbor, the one who always asked for hedge trimming tips, was interviewed. She said Matt was quiet, respectful, a loving father. I guess monsters don't grow horns. Matt pled not guilty, of course. His lawyer argued that I was confused, that the policy was routine, that the pills had no proven connection to my symptoms, that maybe I accidentally took something during postpartum fatigue. They tried to paint me as fragile, unwell, paranoid, but they couldn't argue against the documents, forged signatures, search history for fatal dosages, life insurance clause for double payout in case of accidental death. In private, I was falling apart. Panic attacks hit me in grocery store aisles. I couldn't sleep unless Lily was next to me. I flinched when I saw someone who looked even slightly like Matt. Rachel let us stay with her longer. She gave me space, made tea at night, kept the house quiet so Lily could nap. She never once asked, "Why didn't you see it coming?" Instead, she hugged me one evening and whispered, "He didn't fool you. He betrayed you. That's different." One day while Lily napped, I found myself looking through old photos on my phone. Vacations, baby shower, our wedding. I stared at Matt's face, wondering how I ever thought I knew him. How many times had he looked at me like I was his world while secretly thinking about how much I was worth dead? I began deleting them one by one, and I didn't cry. The day of the trial came faster than I expected. I stood outside the courthouse holding Lily's tiny hand. She looked up at me, eyes wide, sensing something serious but not understanding it. She asked, "Are we going to see Daddy?" And I froze. I knelt down and said softly, "We're going to make sure Mommy is safe. That's what today is about." She nodded, trusting me with the kind of pure faith only a child has. I wished I deserved it. Inside the courtroom, Matt looked thinner, paler. He barely glanced my way. He didn't smile, he didn't frown. He was just hollow. For a moment, a small, shameful moment, I missed him. Not who he was, but who I thought he was. That's the cruel part of betrayal. It doesn't just hurt you, it rewrites your past. Every memory becomes a question, every kiss a maybe. I testified for over 2 hours. I told them everything, how the pills appeared, how the symptoms came, how the life insurance policy was forged. The recording was played in the courtroom, that voicemail I never deleted. Matt's voice joking to someone about being set for life if something ever happened to me. There were gasps, whispers. A juror covered her mouth with her hand. Rachel came. My parents came. Even a few of Matt's old co-workers came, just to sit to see the truth for themselves. Matt didn't take the stand. His lawyer tried one last tactic, painting me as over-emotional, as struggling with postpartum depression, as imagining some of the timeline, but the evidence was overwhelming. They didn't need to hear from him to know. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, I didn't cry. I just looked at Lily, who was coloring quietly beside my mother in the waiting room, and I felt free, not happy, not victorious, just free. Months passed. The headlines faded. The court was behind us. Matt was sentenced to 15 years. He might get out earlier, but I no longer feared him. What scared me more now was the quiet, the future. I moved back into our old house, not because I wanted to, but because I refused to let him steal one more thing from me. The poison didn't win. His lies didn't win. I was still here. I went back to work. Slowly, carefully, people whispered. Of course they did. I was the woman whose husband tried to kill her. But some looked at me differently, with respect, with a strange kind of reverence, as if surviving had turned me into something rare. One day, while unpacking a box in the attic, I found a photo, an old one. Matt, me, and Lily at the park. We looked happy, real, and for the first time, I didn't feel sick when I looked at it. I just felt sad. Sad for the girl in that picture who didn't know what was coming. Sad for the man who threw everything away. But I didn't tear it up, because I had learned something through all this. Pain doesn't disappear when you bury it. You heal by holding it in the light, by naming it, by letting it change you, not break you. Lily is older now. She doesn't ask much about her father. When she does, I tell her the truth, softened, age-appropriate, but honest. I want her to grow up knowing that strength isn't about pretending nothing hurt. It's about surviving what did. People sometimes ask me, how did you get through it? How did you find the strength? And I always say the same thing. I didn't have a choice. I had Lily, I had myself, and I had the truth. I tell this story not for pity, not for drama, but for the woman out there who just found a bottle of pills and can't explain why. For the woman who feels crazy for doubting her husband. For the one who keeps waking up with bruises on her heart. You're not imagining it. You're not overreacting. You're not weak. You are stronger than you think. And sometimes the truth, as painful as it is the first step toward freedom. You are not alone. Subscribe for more real-life stories that matter.